Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I can call the meeting to order, we are now streaming. Warm welcome to you all in attendance and anybody who may be following us on the Council's YouTube channel. Some preliminary announcements. Fire alarms not expected tonight, so if one sounds, we will be evacuating. The best way out is out through the doors you entered into, and on off to your right hand side, 90 degrees, there's other doors that take you to fire exits. We'll be going with you, so don't worry. If for whatever reason those doors are not available to us, there are fire exits behind us. Mobile phones, can I ask please everybody to have their mobile phones and tablet devices turned to silent. Residents' feedback forms. Colleagues, their forms are available to you. We do encourage you to provide feedback. It does help us improve the way our meetings are organised and make them more readily understood by residents. It's sometimes a little bit of a dark art, planning and what goes on and why it happens in particular ways. So we do welcome any feedback that you have. It goes to Democratic Services and they propose improvements in light of that. Number of people around the table. Let me introduce them to you, explain how the meeting is run. The planning committee is made up of councillors, council members. On my far left-hand side, Councillor Beera, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Duncan. On my far right-hand side, Councillor Tucklock, Brightman, Ahmed Walana, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Chamdal. As I say, they are the members of the committee, and each has a vote, and in the unusual event that there is a tied vote, at that stage I will cast a vote. And that is the only time that I will intervene in the voting. The other people around the table are council officers, and they provide expert advice to us. On my far left-hand side, Nicole Cameron is our legal advisor. Luke Taylor is Democratic Services and clerks the meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning, expert planning advice. Meg Harani is also is a senior planning officer and will be presenting the applications, but he's also very capable of giving planning advice. And Ahmed Akram is our highways engineer and will answer questions on highways. Okay, now that is the preliminaries. There are a couple of items that we need to go through just for procedure, and we get through those quickly, and I will explain a little bit about how the meetings run as we get to that part. So item 1, apologies for absence.
There are no apologies.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest matters coming before the committee. I need to declare an interest in the item in part 2, as I have previously been involved in reporting this activity at this site. So I will be leaving the room for agenda item 11 and handing over to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Chamdal. To sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting, colleagues, these are in your pack. Are they agreed? Thank you. Matters, item 4, matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. There are none. Item 5, this is to confirm that items of business marked in part 1 will be considered in public and items in part 2 considered in private. We do have items in both part 1 and part 2. Part 1 are the normal planning applications, and they're discussed in an open forum, and you're welcome to sit and listen to them all and to follow us on, as I say, the Council's YouTube channel. Any time you can look at this planning committee or any other planning committee. Part 2 are matters of enforcement, and they are considered in private because they can result in prosecutions and enforcement activity. The issue and the decision of the committee are published. So there will be a break between the end of the actual planning applications and the start of the enforcement when I'll ask members of the public to leave, and we will be breaking the the YouTube link. Okay, a little bit about meetings and petitions. We do have petition items. Although we're meeting in public, it isn't a public meeting, which means there is no general speaking rights. If you haven't submitted a petition, you are not an applicant or agent in response to a petition or a ward councillor, you unfortunately cannot address the committee. Petitioners, 5 minutes speaking time. I'll talk you through that when we get to it. And councillors are 3 minutes. We will get into that quite quickly. The agenda item will be adjusted in that I'm bringing forward agenda item 10, as that is now a petition item. So we'll be doing 6, 7 and 10 then before reverting to the agenda. So without further ado, we'll get into the purpose of the meeting, which is the planning applications, and item 6, land to the rear of 89 Goshawk Gardens and Haystal Close, Hayes. Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to the land to the rear of 89 and 91 Goshawk Gardens. It forms part of that site. It forms the rear gardens and parking area for those two properties. The application is a corner site, and as members will be aware, there are a number of issues with corner sites involving the infilling of the space and trying to ensure that the openness of the corners is maintained. And in this particular case, the first issue that arises is the fact that it is infilling the space to an unacceptable degree, and so that the openness of the corner site is, in your officer's view, not maintained. The second issue, if I can just go to the layout plans. The second issue is the provision of parking. This area has a very low public transport accessibility rating of 1, which is the lowest, obviously, that you can get. So there will be a reliance on the private car, and the requirement is that for the existing and the proposed properties, 6 spaces should be provided, and there is a shortfall in that. There is also a issue with the layout of the space and the way that it's provided and the gates that are proposed for it. So for those two reasons, the application is recommended for refusal. There is an addendum sheet which members will be aware that there is an emerging local plan part 2 which has reached quite an advanced stage towards adoption, and it's likely that adoption will take place in the next few months. So those policies are now relevant to the consideration of planning applications in general, and I've set out the reasons for that. Reason 2 is I've asked for an amendment of that, and that's set out on page 2 of the addendum, which again takes into account the emerging policies as well. If I can just go through the plans, that's the proposed building. At the moment there are 2 garages on that site, and the gardens of 89 and 91. And these are the existing units here. This is the proposed and the existing here. So in general, in design terms and so on, your officers don't object. It's the actual infilling of the space and the projection forward of this line here. And then the photographs. This is 89 and 91, the front of, and then looking towards the site itself, and this is where the site is. So the 2 garages are the site itself. As you can see, there are parking issues in the area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harani. We have received a petition in objection of Ms. Mayor. Present? No. Having received a petition in objection, that entitles the applicant or agent to speak if they wish to do so. Is Mr. Salter present? Yes. Do you wish to address the committee? You have speaking rights of 5 minutes. If you'd like to come forward, sir, and make yourself comfortable at the chair. You will see before your microphone. It is important because we not only for us to be able to hear in the room and for members of the public, but also for capturing the petition on YouTube, that the microphone is used. And you will see on the base there's a button towards the front edge. That's a toggle on, toggle off. When you press it, that makes the microphone live, and the red light comes up and you toggle it off. So you will have 5 minutes speaking time, And this will be controlled by lights. You will see 4 minutes with a green light, 1 with an amber, and when the red comes, I will draw you to a close.
Before I start my 5 minutes, can I ask advice,
No,
please?
sir. You're entitled to respond to a petition, which all we've received is a petition in objection.
But before I start that, can I just explain that we received this letter dated the 30th of July. I received it on Thursday last for a meeting today.
Planning issues and the process is a separate issue. What you have is an entitlement to support the application in your own words. We will attend to any issues of detail like the letter and timings outside of the meeting. Okay?
Yes, the problem
you will have
is,
5 minutes commencing now. Thank you.
My name is Alan Salter. I'm a director of H. Parfitt and Sons Limited. My father founded the company in 1944. In 1953, he purchased a large parcel of land to the western end of Grosvenor Avenue and Lansbury Drive, which is a continuation of a Nash development since before the war. And we built about 100 units in Grosvenor Avenue and Lansbury Drive. We also built 14 units in Hastel Close and 8 units in Gosort Gardens. I was a young surveyor at the time. We started work in 1954. Things have changed, obviously, in the last 65 years. So those garages that were built for 89 and 91 Gosort Gardens are no longer required. People don't want garages that are not attached to their properties, and also garages built in the 50s are not large enough for present cars, which are much larger. As you've seen, the proposal is to demolish those redundant garages and erect 2 well-planned two-bedroom flats on the area, following the footfall, really, of the garages. One of the objections is the car parking spaces. We've been asked that we need 6 car parking spaces, off-road car parking spaces, for the 2 existing flats in Grosvenor Avenue and for the 2 proposals. Our architect drew up, and this is the point I wanted to make, that he's now amended the drawing to show how these parking spaces can be accommodated. But I did understand that you needed 24 hours notice, and we didn't have enough time to give you 24 hours notice. These are the amended drawings. It's not hugely different, but it does show the car parking spaces with the omission of the gate, which was the other issue. I don't know why the gate was ever there in the first place. The actual buildings comply with legislation for the size of the buildings. The garden amenity space is also large enough to accommodate the requirements. The bin and cycle storage can be provided, and that can be added to the conditions. Gosort Gardens is actually on a bus route. Our tenant on the ground floor doesn't have a car. She relies on public transport. You mentioned the overbearing visual intrusion to street scene and surrounding area. The proposed building will have no detrimental effect on the amenity of any of the adjacent properties. The reference to projection forward the established return line of Hastel Close is incorrect. Clearly, the proposed building is in line with its neighbours, then returning towards Gosort Gardens. There is no established building line in this situation, there being no other buildings which front onto that part of the close. The Council's planning policy makes reference to building lines in 427 of its local plan, which states that building lines within a stream should relate to the tree's pattern, although in some instances varied building lines can achieve diversity in interest. Clearly, the officer's view on this matter is entirely subjective, and we believe incorrect in this assertion that the proposed building would be overbearing and visually intrusive. Our architect would have liked to have been here to present this, but he didn't have enough notice. One of the external consultancies, the complaints we've had really refer to an original application which was taken out. That was an extension to the building of 91. So It is worth mentioning these proposals are in line with a number of the Council's policy which seeks to increase the housing supply in sustainable locations, making effective use of available lands. We also believe that these proposals are well designed, sit well within the street scene, and it certainly will improve the area that we have. You've seen pictures of the garages that are being proposed to be demolished. The parking already exists next door, and we're proposing to do a similar thing in front of 89 and 91. This was a photograph taken this morning. There is one van parked where you've managed to show a whole line, and there's no reason why cars shouldn't park on the other side of the road, because there's no restriction on parking, which would accommodate the off-street car parking spaces which we've shown on our revised drawing. Now, am I allowed to hand these out?
We are considering the planning application before us, sir, so it becomes difficult for us to consider alternative plans.
Yes, I understand that, Mr. Chairman. That was the point I tried to make at the beginning, that, you know, we've only had 3 days. My architect understood that we would have 3 weeks' notice.
Draw you to a close now, as the 5 minutes has completed. Colleagues, are there any questions at all of Mr. Salter? No. If I could invite you, please, to turn off the microphone and then return to your seat. That would be much appreciated. Colleagues, you have heard from officers about the importance of the openness of that corner. You've heard from the petitioner about how this development, in his view, improves the situation and the appearance of the neighbourhood. It is a matter now for you to consider and to debate. And Councillor Chandel?
Thank you, Chairman. The petitioner made comments on the building line. Could we have some response from the office as regards that, first of all?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think what officers are saying is that it does protrude in front of the 8991. There is obviously a no building line in reference to the rest of Haystall Close, and it does comply with a frontage on Haystall Close. Thank you, Chairman.
Did that clarify it for you, Councillor Chandler?
Not quite.
Ask again then.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can,
Yeah, show us a few pictures.
if I can just go to the layout plan. So what our officer's saying is that the corner and the openness is, and the importance of that is sort of provided by this sort of line here, and it's the protrusion in front, which you would be able to view obviously from Goshawk Gardens, which is, in your officer's view, important to maintain. So it's that protrusion in front of that line there that is the crucial point. Thank you.
Yeah, that explains it.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other issues? Let's not be shy, because we have to come to a decision on this one. Councillor Tutwell?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask for some clarification around the parking that was maintained, referenced in the officer's report, just to sort of get a firmer understanding what the actual concerns are around the parking.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's simply the proposal requires 6 parking spaces, so 3 spaces for the existing units and 3 spaces for the proposed flats. The submitted drawings show 2 for the existing and 2 for the proposed, so there's a shortfall of 2 spaces which will be displaced onto the highway network. That in of itself is contravention to our current policy aim 14.
Is there any sort of diagrams or anything you could show to illustrate the point on there? So
at the moment the provision is for 4 spaces, so you've got 1 space in the front of 8991 there, 1 space there, and 2 spaces in that position there. The other issue is this space here has a gate in front of it, which is which means that anyone trying to open those gates would have to park across the highway in the footpath and obstruct the footpath in doing that.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Chairman. Returning to the business about the established line, I have to say I'm not really convinced about it, because clearly, if you're looking next to 89 and 91 Goshawk, yes, this building would be in the way, but clearly if the building wasn't there, the buildings on the other side of Haystall would be in the way, sort of 20 yards further along, so to speak. That said, I do agree with every other issue that's raised, sort of thing, so I'm more than happy to recommend that we go with officer's recommendation, if nobody else has got anything to say.
Councillor Chandel?
Sorry, just going off from Councillor Tuckwell's, there's also mention of unsafe being part of where one parking space is. Is that the one down at 91?
Colleagues, if I might just indicate that at this moment in time, it is possible, probable, that the parking issues can be addressed, and maybe even be conditioned, certainly things like the gate. What is of more importance to me is whether or not this building in this location is acceptable, or whether you believe that it is detrimental to the openness of that area and therefore shouldn't be allowed. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having sat on this committee for too many years now, infilling of these kind of areas is often difficult, and we've in the past maintained that the building line is difficult, and to make decisions there is difficult. I knew straight away when I looked at this that the building line would be a factor, so I would be in favour of seconding Councillor Chapman's proposal and going with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded. So can I have a show of hands, please, if there are no other issues on this one? That is unanimous. It is refused for the reasons given in the report. Thank you. Turning now to agenda item 7, number 3, Cambridge Road. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the demolition of the existing dwelling, which is a chalet bungalow built in what looks like the 1950s, and its replacement with a 3-storey block containing 6 self-contained flats. The site is in the North Uxbridge area of special local character, and there are obviously policies which protect the heritage asset that it is. I think the best thing for me is to refer you to the Conservation Officer's comments in relation to its siting, size, scale and design, and they're set out on page 25 of the agenda, and in essence he states that the bulk is unacceptable as it would dominate the streetscape. It's an over-development of the plot, filling up the gaps which allow views through. The frontage is also unacceptable, and the design of the buildings in themselves are unacceptable. So for those particular reasons, we think that the development in detail is unacceptable. I'd also refer you to the comments of the Trees and Landscape Officer relating in particular to the frontage, and they are set out on page 26. And again, there is an objection to the lack of landscaping on the frontage, and what is in essence 100% hard standing, or close to 100% hard standing of the frontage and its appearance. So those reasons again, we are recommending refusal. If I can just turn your attention to the addendum sheet which might be slightly confusing. On page 20 of the agenda, you'll see that the first reason for refusal has got an overprint on it, and so the first part of the addendum sets out what that reason should have said, and then the second part is an amendment request to that reason, and you'll see from that that we've taken out the words "the principle of intensifying the residential use." The principle in itself is acceptable, it's the details that are not in this particular case, and so we are saying that the site can be redeveloped possibly, but not in the way that is being proposed. If I can just go through the plans, these are the layout plans, and as you'll see from the frontage, the only area of landscaping on the frontage is these areas in front of the building. In general, I did have a look on Street View. There are a mixture of properties. Quite a few do have substantial landscaping to the frontage, but the character is that most of those properties have some form of landscaping to the frontage, particularly with dwarf walls and hedges behind. So in this particular case, that isn't there to relieve the hard standing. These are the design or the layouts, and you'll see from the roof plan that in essence it's a flat roof with pitched sides, and that's reflected in the elevations, and that's not really the character of either Cambridge Road or the area of special local character. Sorry, this is the building itself, and then the adjoining properties, and you'll see this. I think this sort of property reflects the character of most of the frontages along there. They do have substantial hard standing behind, but they are sort of softened by the frontages, and that's a reflection of the character of the wider area of special local character as well. That's the adjoining property, the application site, and the rear of the site. So it does have a substantial garden to it. And that's the... Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harney. Mr. Colin Giles, and are you present? You wish to speak to the committee? If you'd like to come forward, sir. Again, 5 minutes speaking time, controlled by the lights, 4 minutes on the green, 1 on amber. And when it comes to red, I'll draw you to a close. Make yourself comfortable. Microphone, the button to the front edge, you will see. Once you toggle that on and start speaking, we will start the clock, okay? Oh, sorry, it's been, the clerk has brought to my attention the fact that you have submitted 3 slides, which have already been shown. Is that correct? No. They're going to be shown now. Fantastic.
Do you want to talk to the slides? Or?
If you could put up...
Let us start the 5 minutes, because I need to constrain it to 5 minutes, and you indicate when you want the slides changed, and we will do that for you. Okay?
Fantastic slide.
Excellent. Microphone. Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. My name is Colin Giles. I live at number 5 Cambridge Road, which is next door to the subject proposed development. I speak on behalf of a substantial group of residents on Cambridge Road. We generally concur with the planning officer's recommendation, but it appears that the planning report has not included any concerns regarding the loss of light and the overseeing of number 1 Cambridge Road, which is, if you look at the circle at the bottom there, and if you look at the kind of semicircle, those are actually, that's number 1, and those are actually windows. So we would like the loss of light and overseeing added to the reason for refusal. You will see from the drawings submitted with the proposal, the original drawings, that north is also incorrectly shown. So it is not immediately apparent that the rear of the house is in fact faces northeast, which means as the sun rises in the east, there will be a great loss of light to number 1 Cambridge Road. I should also note that the plans submitted by the applicant do not show windows situated at the rear side of 3 Cambridge Road. These are the windows. This is the proposed development. There's windows here also. So these windows will actually face windows that are on the existing property. This is also, so not only are the windows there that will cut down on you won't get light into the windows, there's also going to be a decrease in privacy because the windows on the proposed development will look directly into the windows on number 1. Additionally, please note that number 1 Cambridge Road has an annex, which is the yellow building at the bottom here. This is an annex. This is their garden. This is their property. But again, you'll see that it's not shown on the applicant's plans. So the applicant has missed the windows on number 1, and they've also missed the annex, which are probably significant. So the significance with regard to the annex is that they will be subject to overseeing and lack of privacy from the development's windows, which are elevated and have direct views into the annex. In conclusion, we suggest it was difficult for the planning officer to add these aforementioned loss of light and overseeing to the reasons for refusal, as the application did not reflect the direction of the sun, the windows at the rear of number 3 Cambridge Road, or the annex located at the bottom of the garden. So hence we would like loss of light and overseeing added to the reasons for refusal. You also, in your planning report, mentioned parking, and I think the requirement for there only to be 6 spaces, but you also mentioned that they would need to have, that the 6 spaces was adequate, but they didn't take into consideration access for people that might have wheelchairs or who wouldn't be able to elevate stairs. So again, I think you need to, that would be nice if that was taken another look at and maybe added to the reasons for refusal. You'll see that Cambridge Road, as highlighted by the planning officer, is a road with 1- and 2-story properties, and this property, which will have 6 units and 2 buildings, which is more like a hotel or a block of flats, is not in line with the other properties on the road or in the area, in this area of special character. And that's all I really had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Have we seen each of the slides that you wish to see?
I think this depicts everything that I need to show.
That's fine, as long as you're comfortable that we have shown what you asked us to show. That's fine. Colleagues, are there any questions at all of the petitioner? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that information. It's very useful and helpful. You referred to the annex at number 1. Are people living in that annex?
Yes. Yes.
So,
I can throw my voice back.
Yeah. So are they a separate, or are they part of the same family?
It's a permitted development and they're paying council tax.
Okay.
That's something we'll need to explore, and thank you for your assistance, but I really need to
Thank you, just so that we understand.
Draw a line there.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been helpful. Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions at all? Sir, if I could invite you please to turn the microphone off and then return to the seat. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Is the applicant or agent, I have a Mr. Wynne indicated, present, wish to speak? So no applicant, no agent. I understand the councillors. Councillor Goddard, you wish to address the committee. If you'd like to come forward, you have 3 minutes speaking time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank officers for their report, which provides 2 very solid and undeniable grounds for refusal. I also fully endorse the comments made by Mr. Colin Giles on behalf of the petitioners. It's clear that the proposals represent a gross overdevelopment of the site, and that the development would create an area of predominantly hard landscaping at its front. Cambridge Road lies within the North Uxbridge area of special local character, and I must make 2 comments to you about this. Firstly, Hillingdon's policy BE5 states, within areas of special local character, new development should harmonise with the materials, design features, architectural style and building heights predominant in the area. Now, there may well be a small number of 4-storey buildings in neighbouring Harefield Road, but all of the houses in Cambridge Road are 2-storey without exception. This application is for a 3-storey building. Furthermore, the policy states, when considering proposals for works within an area of special local character, the following are important. There will be a presumption in favour of retaining buildings and features that make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the area. Yet these proposals contemplate demolition and replacement. Members of the committee, it's clear that the applicants have tried to convince us all that they've met the additional requirements of developing in an area of special local character, but have demonstrably failed in that attempt. I also put it to you that the applicants have completely failed to consider the interests of neighbouring residents. This is reflected in the fact that a petition in opposition containing 25 signatures was submitted, and in addition there were further 11 objections. This application would result in 5 extra dwellings being created in a street currently containing only 16 homes. This could result in as many as 20 additional residents' cars seeking parking, whilst the proposals make provision for a mere 6 spaces. Cambridge Road already suffers from overflow parking by Harefield Road residents, and this is about to get far worse once the already approved Aybrook Arms redevelopment in Harefield Road is completed, I might add, with its own inadequate parking. The knock-on effect on the already congested traffic flows in Harefield Road is also an inevitable consequence. Whilst I do appreciate the technical and legal constraints under which the officers have to consider these matters, the practical implications for residents are absolutely clear. I'm perplexed as to how it is that the absolutely evident overlooking and loss of light impact upon the immediately neighbouring number 1 Cambridge Road has not been adequately considered in an otherwise comprehensive report.
I need to draw you to a close at that point.
I therefore invite officers to consider these grounds and please support the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you very much. Any questions of clarification? Thank you. I invite you please to return off the microphone, return to the seat. Thank you. Colleagues, I picked up from the petitioners some issues that maybe we need to explore in a little bit more detail. We have loss of light on the impact of number 1, which I'll be asking officers to comment on. Daylight and sunlight impacts, because the orientation is not correct. The privacy issues with opposing windows. And we have the annex and the privacy to the occupants of the annex. And at some stage we'll attend to the parking sufficiency, as that was suggested by the councillor was not adequate. So if I could take the loss of light, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just actually show you this photograph. This is number 1. This building here. And I can go to the layout plan. You'll see that the proposed building doesn't extend beyond number 1. We don't have any plans of the internal layout of number 3 Cambridge, so we have to go on what the officers see on their site visit, and as you can see from the photograph, there didn't appear to be habitable room windows in the side elevation of that property, which would be affected. So, sorry. As far as I can work out, that is number 1. That is number 1.
Well, the issue we have here is the petitioner has asserted that there are windows to the flank wall of number 1, that this building will obstruct, and what we're not in a position is to refute that by the sounds.
As I say, we don't have any internal layouts. The only way we can check that is to do an internal viewing of number 3 to find out exactly where the habitable room windows are. Sorry, number 1. To find out exactly where the habitable room windows are. So, if we find that there are habitable room windows, then members could delegate to the head of planning to add an additional reason relating to the impact on those habitable room windows.
Thank you. That was exceptionally unusual that I'm going to allow. You're suggesting that there is a photograph here. In which case, let's see that photograph, because that will assist us. So if you point out that photograph to us. Okay.
And so,
thank you.
these people live at number 1.
Thank you. That has been helpful. We now understand the issue, that we have a kitchen window in the flank wall at first floor, at ground floor level.
Number 3.
Thank you. I know you are. I know, but I need to try and stick to the rules as best I can. So we have a ground floor window on a flank wall that would face the development, and we have a window to the second floor, which is shown as a floor landing oblique office. Would you like to comment on those?
I'm getting slightly concerned at this point as to whether we need to defer this item so that officers can actually visit the property. There was 2 issues sort of raised: the impact on the neighbours, which I'm sensing from discussions with my colleague Mr. Hirani doesn't have enough specific knowledge that I think we can, as officers, fully advise you. There was a second issue raised on parking. I think that's very straightforward, and I can perhaps clear that issue so that if members defer for more clarification on neighbour impacts, it's solely on that issue. So just commenting on the parking, this site is PTAL 2, it's on the cusp of PTAL 3. The PTAL increases in a relatively short distance towards Uxbridge Town Centre, and it's that level of accessibility of the site measured in public transport accessibility level that is such that we cannot take, in my view, a stricter approach on parking on this site than we might in a more remote location. So it's quite, to put it bluntly, at appeal we would not be supported if we sought to argue a higher parking ratio, and that's the blunt answer. Clearly, if there are unacceptable neighbour impacts, that's a completely different matter, and were we to flesh those out, an inspector hopefully would support us. But I think I'm slightly concerned at this point that we may need to defer to officers to clarify neighbour impacts further.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Roger. On the issue of parking, the proposal of one parking space for a flat in a PTL3 is not unusual, and so I would suggest that our head of planning is on strong grounds there, and I would also suggest that we put that issue aside, and that we look here around the issues of the loss of light, the daylight and sunlight impact, privacy issues of opposing windows, and the annex, the privacy of the annex. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Also, when I saw this, I think it breaches the 15 metres. I know it's not an entirely flank wall. It's got high-level windows in the proposal, but it is within 15 metres of number 1, so would breach that policy.
We will ask officers to consider all of those issues.
Okay. Can just be added to the list. I agree.
Yep.
I agree with all the things that you said previously. I'd just like
yep.
that added to it, please.
And whilst we're looking at it, could you also please consider the privacy of the bedroom to the ground floor rear flat, where you potentially have an outlook onto a fence some 4 foot away, and the other outlook is onto a walkway where people will be walking alongside it, and it's a bedroom. It's about whether or not there's sufficient privacy to that bedroom and sufficient outlook. If you could look at that as well, please. Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan.
I move deferment.
Somebody second, please. Councillor Tuckle first up. Thank you. Show of hands, please, on that one. Okay. That's deferred. Let me explain. We don't have enough information here to make an informed decision around the issues raised in the petition around the impact on the neighbours. The privacy, the loss of light, daylight and sunlight, and the annex, the impact on the annex. What officers are going to go away and have a look at those specific issues. They will then make any adjustment that may be necessary to the report and bring it back, because it could be that they recommend additional refusal reasons. Okay? Thank you very much for the reminder. Unusually, one petition allows one speaking opportunity. If you wish to speak again at the next hearing, when it comes back, you need a new petition. I'm sorry that is onerous on members of the public, but they are the council's rules. So when it comes back again, if you wish again to speak, because there might be a changes to the officer's report that you might wish to comment on, you will need to have a new petition to enable you to speak. Okay? The councillors have a right to address the committee anyway. Okay? I hope that's understood. The notification?
I believe we have your contact details, but obviously we do through Democratic Services. So we will make sure that there's a communication.
It'll be the same process that you were advised of this hearing. So once the report is written and done, then you will be advised of when the hearing date is. The report will be made available, and at that stage you might wish to consider whether or not you want to address the committee and whether or not you then need a new petition. Okay. We recognise the difficulties, and we will make sure you have sufficient time, okay? And we wouldn't wish to cut across residents' ability to address the committee properly. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving on now. We're going to agenda item 10, Unit 240A, into Uxbridge High Street.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the change of Unit 240A into Uxbridge High Street to from a retail use to a restaurant within Class A3. Members will know this site as the Waterstones Bookshop, and the proposal is to convert part of it to a restaurant use. If I can go to the principal of the use, members will note that it doesn't strictly comply with the principle of the policies that are set out. The current non-retail use within the primary shopping area is below 70%, but your officers recognise the current situation, economic situation, and also the issues relating to the vacancy rates and so on. So the reasons why your officers are recommending approval, despite the fact that it does not comply, are set out particularly on pages 76 to 78. There are a number of issues in relation to the conditions, and James is going to expand on those in relation to the addendum sheet. But in principle, the use is acceptable, and I can just go through. You'll see that the site is in the conservation area, and that is the existing layout. And the proposed. So that's the unit itself, and this part of the unit would be the restaurant, so it would front onto the high street, and then the upper levels would retain as the Waterstones. James?
Thank you. So, just to clarify, the Waterstones will be retained, but for economic reasons, they want to slightly downsize the unit. In terms of the conditions, so if I can refer members to the back page of the addendum, so at this stage, the applicant is into, and the reason I explain that is that they don't yet have detailed working drawings from the preferred A3 operator, which is Coat, although I would clarify this is a change of use for an A3 rather than for a named operator. So we have had a discussion ahead of the meeting regarding conditions. So I'm suggesting a condition that has kitchen extract and flue details. This is purely and simply that we don't want any flues that disfigure or affect the aesthetics of the exterior of the building. There are other. It's a quite complicated bit of site, so there would be void in other areas where a flue could be provided, but it's ensuring we have the final details. A second condition for fully accessible toilets, which is self-explanatory. Now, the third condition in the addendum was that so Waterstones have confirmed that they'd have a new lift, and that's shown on the plans. But this is where it gets slightly confusing. The lift for the Coat is marked as indicative. So to sort of deal with this issue, we proposed a condition that required a lift to be provided. The applicant has clarified they'd have concerns with that condition because the lift would serve a small mezzanine that Coat are saying they wouldn't need for their front of house. So what's been suggested is an alternative to the condition in the addendum that simply says the mezzanine level of the proposed A3 use shall only be used for storage, other back of house uses or customer toilets only. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to comment further at this point because we've got a speaker, but effectively members will need to consider the principle of the use, and if they're happy with that, which conditions should be imposed, and obviously myself and Meg G will come in after the petitioner has spoken and speak further to advise committee on the planning conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have a petition in support of Mr. Nicholson. If you would wish to address the committee, if you'd like to come forward, sir. 5 minutes speaking time. Only 5 minutes, there's no right of reply to a petition in support. You'll have 4 minutes on the green light, 1 on the amber, and I'll draw you to a close on the red. You could turn the microphone on using the button at the front. Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Planning Committee this evening. I am Matthew Nicholson, the Head of Town Planning at Into, the owners of Into Uxbridge. As you're aware, the application site comprises a unit at Into Uxbridge, which is currently occupied by Waterstones. Following an operational review earlier this year, Waterstones requested to reduce the size of their unit to ensure the store remains successful. We considered moving Waterstones to 2 other locations within the shopping centre, but neither was able to provide the right combination of trading, ancillary space and overheads to meet their needs. We managed to agree terms in May to allow Waterstones to downsize and remain in their existing unit, subject to the surplus part of the unit being let to another operator. Had we not agreed these terms, there was a risk that Waterstones may have left the town altogether. The current unit is proposed to be split so that Waterstones face into the shopping centre and the newly created unit will front onto the high street. The new unit did not generate any demand from A1 retail occupiers, however we received some interest from restaurant operators. The lack of demand for A1 retail occupiers is due to the size and configuration of the new unit and because this part of the high street is considered to be secondary by many retailers. The newly created High Street unit is to be occupied by Côte Brasserie, a national restaurant chain serving authentic French dishes. It is high-end family dining and an operator that is expected to have a large draw for customers into Uxbridge Town Centre. The restaurant will be open from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m, meaning there will be active frontage throughout the day and evening. As demonstrated by a separate application submitted by Côte relating to shopfront design, the proposals will further enhance the high street and bring activity to it with new external seating areas. As retailers and town centres continue to go through a period of change, it has become increasingly important that town centres broaden their attraction through a wider mix of uses and provide a more experiential offer to draw customers in. Food and drink uses provide this and are now a critical component of maintaining the vitality and viability of town and city centres, as endorsed by up-to-date national planning policy. Non-retail uses such as restaurants therefore have an important part to play in attracting and maintaining visitors to the town centre, increasing footfall and activity over a longer period. Into Uxbridge needs to be able to evolve and respond to the changing retail market. We want to give our customers more reasons to visit the shopping centre and the wider town centre rather than spend their money online or in other shopping centres outside Hillingdon. Allowing for high quality food and drink operators such as Côte is therefore a key part of this. We have been in dialogue with officers in regard to planning conditions, particularly a draft condition requiring a lift right up to the 11th hour. We and Côte do not consider that such a condition is necessary, as customers will only be seated and dining on the ground floor where there will be a fully accessible toilet. Upstairs will be additional toilet, storage and office space. To insist on a lift would render the scheme unviable for Côte as it would consume too much dining space. However, if the concern is that Côte could provide further dining upstairs in the future, or another operator for that matter, then the condition could be amended to restrict the upper floor to toilets, storage and office use. So Côte would therefore need to revert to the council to convert that space in the future, at which time a lift could be requested. In summary, the need for flexibility and appropriate mix of uses is particularly important in the current retail climate. It is considered that the proposed change of use would enhance the vitality and viability of the centre and bring clear and long-lasting benefits to Uxbridge, strengthening its offer. It will also secure the future of Waterstones as a part of Uxbridge Town Centre. We welcome the officer's recommendation for approval, but request our ask in regards to the condition is considered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Colleagues, are there any questions for short clerk? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. So the proposal is that Waterstones will have access from within the mall.
Yes.
And Côte will front onto the high street.
Yes.
And on the plans that we're shown, it looks as if Waterstones will have a lift.
Waterstones will, yes.
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 I don't have any problem what you're saying about the lifts, as long as there are toilet facilities on the ground floor for disabled people.
Yes.
and I mean, subsequently, you know, if there are more seating upstairs on the mezzanine floor, and there are stairs that members of the public can use, that doesn't matter as long as there's provision for disabled people and also for people with young children who might need changing facilities or something. So as long as they're provided on the ground floor.
Well, that is the proposal, and that's the
Sorry.
condition.
Can I just come across...
Just confirming what the proposals are. So
It's a question of clarification,
Yeah.
because I actually wish to speak to the committee on that. So what is your question of clarification?
Well, that's what this gentleman was answering. I was asking what lifts are provided and what toilet facilities are provided for
No
who,
lifts,
where.
no toilets are at the present provided. We have no information at all before us around the internal layout of this property.
Right.
Okay, and this, as the chairman, this concerns me, and hence why there are some addendum issues here with conditions, because actually I don't think that there is adequate information here for the committee to make an informed decision about the use of that particular thing in detail as an A3. I do believe...
Am I allowed to respond to the council?
No, you can't.
Well, he is allowed to respond to me. That's the
He
regulation.
answered that question.
He was just explaining and you interrupted.
He answered
Sorry.
that question.
I started to.
Is there going to be a lift?
In Waterstones, yes. In Cote, no. But there will be toilets at ground floor, accessible toilets in response to your accessibility officers' notes, where we're getting in dialogue with officers to make sure those conditions are
because you're required by law, I
You have
believe,
now answered the question. Thank you.
Is it that you're required by law to provide those?
It has to be DDA compliant.
It does.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to turn off the microphone, unless there are other questions of clarification. Councillor Chamdal.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that. You mentioned something about opening and closing times. I didn't quite catch that. Could you just repeat those? Just the timings. If you tell opening time and closing time, please. Thank you.
Councillor Tuggle.
Mr. President, press my mic so people at home could hear us. Just a point you raised earlier on about external seating. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Colleagues, that's subject to a later application if it comes forward. Okay, what we are considering is the planning application before us now, and that does not have any details at all about it. It was mentioned that there may be a subsequent planning application that come forward that will deal with the outside design and may include
there is
outside
one running
seating.
at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
It's with officers.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the basic principle, I've got no problems with this at all.
Is it a question of the petition?
Oh, sorry, I thought, yes, sorry.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions to the petitioner, thank you. I'd invite you, please, to just return to your seat. Colleagues, as I was saying, this, for me, and the indication of the conditions that are within the addendum that have been subject to discussion and are not fully agreed, reflects to me that the report is inadequate in many areas. It does not cover any issue around the accessibility, and now we cannot make an informed decision about whether or not we are compliant with the law to ensure that there is no discrimination at all to disabled people. Should there be, for example, additional seating upstairs, that cannot be right, that they are not allowed to use part of the restaurant. So there are issues for me around the detail. What may assist, though, is if we consider the principle of the use. And if there was an agreement of the principle of the use, then what I would suggest we did is defer it so that the detail required for us to make an informed decision, like the kitchens, the ventilation, the van, the hours of operation, the servicing, all of the other matters that ordinarily we look at and consider can be provided in this application. However, it may assist into, and it may insist some other future operator, to know whether or not we would allow a restaurant. And so for me, I would like, please, to consider first just the principle of whether or not we would allow this conversion. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've got it right this time. As I was going to say before, I got confused earlier. I've got no issues with this in principle. I can fully understand the commercial thinking with Into and Waterstones. But as you've said yourself, we don't know the details whatsoever. So I don't know what the wording would be. I'm more than happy to recommend that we accept it in principle but defer the details. I don't know what the legal thing is.
Thank you. We'll work that out if we come to it. Councillor Chamdal and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree entirely. Shopping habits have changed greatly from where you just went and shopped and went home. It's now people actually look for good eating places and shop. So we've all visited Waterstones and we know the layout quite clearly, but we haven't got. We pass applications on the plans in front of us. There's not enough in front of me to say yes. But in terms of the principle, I definitely agree.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Exactly the same, really. And you can see that was trying to ensure that there would be compliance with, DDA regulations and laws. And they, by law, would have to abide by that or be in breach of other legislation, I believe. So I'm very happy with the principle. I think this is a good location, close to the centre, good meeting place for people, would add vibrancy to Uxbridge. I think it's a good use in principle. I would support that.
Colleagues, now I might be guided by our legal here. Whether or not we can tie our own hands and agree the principle here now, or whether we can indicate that if the application were brought back to us in a more prepared way, we would be looking at that detail, having determined now.
I wouldn't suggest that you agree the principle indefinite, because you do not have the details to make the decision this evening. Therefore, you've had a discussion and a debate on the principle. So, in principle, you agree with the principle, but that will be on the basis that you receive the further details that are required in order that you can make a decision.
Okay. I believe we're at a situation. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I would like to move that, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
We indicate that we defer this, ask officers to go back. Fortunately, the gentleman who spoke to us has heard this and it's on YouTube, and they will know our concerns and hopefully they can be addressed in the plans. So I move deferment on that basis.
Councillor Ahmed-Wallana. Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. I think that is agreed. What we've done here, sir, is to defer it, but we have indicated that, subject to the detail being sufficient, that the principle of conversion to an A3 is likely to be favourable. Okay? But we don't have enough detail to make an informed decision on the application before us at this stage. Thank you. That completes part... No, it doesn't. One more. It doesn't. We go backwards. Agenda item 9.
Very quickly, members will recall this came to committee quite a while back. It was agreed. The only change to it is the wording of condition 13, so that the details of that are required prior to occupation as opposed to prior to commencement. It is a condition that requires management of the open spaces and the areas, the common areas around the site, and those details, if they are submitted prior to occupation, are acceptable. They don't need to be submitted prior to commencement. So with that, it's recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a little bit about this? I know this seems, a very minor sort of small thing, but it's talking about the planting. I'm fine about that, but it's the management, because we're becoming aware of quite serious management issues with certain, in certain developments where they really need to have been tightened up at the planning stage, and sometimes management schemes are imposed on people. In this case, it's a small development, so hopefully there would be less opportunity for that kind of thing. But in certain cases, it's well, it's excessive, and the cost is excessive, and the cost borne by the residents is excessive, and it's very difficult to challenge that once it's been agreed. So I just wondered what the implications are. You're going to build 7 houses here, and then there's going to be a landscaping scheme, which presumably will be put in by the developers, and then will it just be up to the 7 householders to manage their gardens and the communal area?
Generally, in these cases, there's a management company that's set up, and obviously the residents are part of that management company, and the communal spaces are maintained by that company as opposed to each individual resident. And the issue is that if we don't have these conditions, or this condition, then the communal spaces, nobody knows who maintains them, and they don't get maintained, and then it appears very untidy, and then we're into a situation of untidy land.
I do appreciate that, and I appreciate the need for it, but what has been happening is that management schemes have been put in which are charging excessively for what they're doing. Residents are complaining about this quite rightly, getting their own schemes costed up with alternative providers and not being able to bring those in. And I don't want us to be underwriting that kind of situation.
I understand the point being made. The question before us now is the timing of the condition. The condition itself is not changing. Okay, the condition is what the condition is, which is that this management plan needs to be agreed by the local authority. The issue is the timing of it. Does that have to be done? Is that imperative that it is done as was initially agreed prior to commencement, or could it be prior to occupation? Now, I, for myself, cannot see a reason of why it needs to be prior commencement. And I would have believed that prior to occupation, that if this were resolved as the condition states, it would be adequate. Councillor Duncan.
I think prior to occupation is fine as long as the details are known by people beforehand, because that's another issue. There's an awful lot of sleight of hand that's going on in these things, I have to say, and probably other councillors are coming across this too. But I do want to have something...
Officers have heard you here, and they will make sure that your views are taken into effect here.
When they're approving a management scheme,
yes,
when it comes forward, hopefully there will be some safeguards in that.
The application for us is just on this timing issue of the existing condition.
Yes, but it's not just about that. It's us ensuring that there is something reasonable. Everything that we do as local authority must be based on reasonableness.
In terms of the issue that you raise, it's not really an element that we can deal with today. That problem is well known across the country, and I know exactly what you're referring to. That's dealt with under separate legislation. Actually, it's private law between the owners and the management company. So that's something that we can't control under this. What we can control is what is contained in the maintenance and management scheme. So we approve that. So we approve what's required. So if that's clearly stated, later on, another element of that, the legal dispute, which we aren't involved in, will have a clear management strategy, etc., to refer to. But for today's purposes, Chairman's correct. We just need to look at whether commencement or pre-occupation is the relevant starting point for the condition.
Thank you. I'm happy with pre-occupation then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Gone off what Labour's Councillor Gardner said, I'd like to move with the officer's recommendation. Duncan, sorry, what did I say? Did I say Gardner? It's old age. I do apologise.
It is getting late. Let's
sorry.
Stay a little bit focused. Councillor Tamdale, you're formally proposing. Were you seconding? Or Councillor Duncan? Thank you. Show of hands, please, on that one. That's everybody. That's agreed. That I believe has completed part one. So we're now going to turn to part two, and I must